Hey guys, my name's Heath. Welcome back to the second video of my Holden Torana that's sitting next to me. This video we're going to focus on the bonnet hinges and a bit of a rework that I've had to do on them. So being a 1970s Torana or Holden or I think a lot of Chevrolets are very similar, the bonnet hinge is a pressed steel assembly, like a scissor type assembly with a tension coil spring in it, just a steel spring that's always under tension, is always trying to be shorter than it is. It's trying to be shorter than it is the most when the bonnet is closed, and then as you open the bonnet it relieves a little bit and it gets shorter, and that's what helps you, that energy is what helps you lift the bonnet up and keeps the bonnet supported in the up position against its own weight and wind that comes along and whatever, so you can work on the car or look at the motor. So that's all sweet. It's a good, elegant system. I'm quite a fan of it. I wanted to keep that, and when I got my car on the road, it was my plan to keep it. But this bonnet is a fiberglass unit. The whole car's got a lot of weight reduction in it, and that's under 10 kilos. The original bonnet is like 22 kilos. It's steel. There's a massive difference there. I knew that there would be a difference there, of course. So the standard hinges, hinge springs, are this big steel, like that's, I don't know, 4mm coil, like wire diameter or something like that. I got some trampoline springs. These ones have been zinc plated black to kind of suit the rest of the look, and they fit on okay. They didn't really need much modification to clamp onto the original hinges, so that's what I did. And when I first hung the panels, it seemed good. When I lifted the bonnet, it supported the weight okay. It was very comfortable to lift. I thought it was all sweet. Anyway, I left the car parked for a little while with the bonnet down, and I noticed a bit of a problem that I never would have anticipated. The fiberglass bonnet is a shitload weaker than the steel bonnet, and the torque or the moment that's been exerted on this, it's trying to open the bonnet the whole time, it was actually bending the bonnet in a bit of an arch shape in this axis, if that makes sense. So above the wheel was opening up the panel gap, and you were starting to see a little bit of the orange engine bay when the bonnet was closed. So that certainly was not very good. I didn't like that at all. I needed to come up with a solution. I was in a hurry to go to Summer. That's where the car kind of did its first and only event so far. I just made a little sheet metal thing up that would clip onto the hooks of the hinge to emulate the spring. And when I wanted to close the bonnet, I'd just take that off, put it in my pocket, close the bonnet. And that was kind of okay to get me out of the jam. But I wanted something that was, more functionally nice, so it just happens automatically every time. I didn't want to have a prop, so like a lot of econo shitboxes from the 90s or now or whatever, they've got like a prop that's pivoting and you put that in a hole up there. I didn't like that idea at all. I don't think it looks very classy, and it interrupts your view of the engine bay when the car's on display. So for me, that was never going to cut it. Other people have said, oh, you should go and get, billet speed shop hinges that have an integrated gas strut. I don't have a problem with the gas struts. I don't really like the look of those products all that much. They're not really aligned with what I'm trying to do with this car. But that's not a solution anyway. So if you have a gas strut there generating the force rather than a bit of metal that you're, pulling, if it has enough strength to hold the bonnet up to support it, it has too much preload in the down position. It has exactly the same problem. Whether it's a gas spring or a steel spring, you still have exactly the same issue. So that wasn't the solution either. I wanted to make a mechanical solution, and I had to have no preload in the closed position so that the panel could just relax. And if it gets hot on a hot day, I don't want it to bloody reset in some new position or anything like that. So what I've come up with, I think, is good in all of those respects, and I'm going to cut back to some earlier footage where I explain what I've done and do some comparisons and stuff. So I hope you enjoy watching. Cheers. So we're looking again at the partially disassembled Torana engine bay, and I've set it up for this little demonstration with a standard type bonnet hinge on the left hand side with a trampoline spring, so the lighter one, not the original Holden one that's really, really heavy. And on the right hand side of the car, I've got my modified one. So I've clamped on a bit of galvanized RHS here, and that's just going to give me a little bit of leverage with my hand so that I can in fact kind of mimic what the bonnet does. When the bonnet's assembled, you get a lot more leverage, of course. So when I pull this down with my hand, the spring is actually getting longer as the bonnet gets closer down to closed. When the spring gets longer, because it's a tension spring, it is actually applying more and more force the longer it gets. That is why it's putting such a high torsional kind of moment through the bonnet when it's fully closed, whereas when it's up in the open position, it's fine, it's not a problem. With the right-hand side of the car, I've got my modified one with this multi-position stay. You'd think it was the same, but when you decide to take it to the full open limit, it flicks a little thing and it allows me to put that to a closed position, and there's no force, of course. It's not trying to open the bonnet in this position. When I want to open the bonnet, I can lift it up. Now, fiberglass bonnet's so bloody light, I don't need a spring to help me lift it. I can just do it very comfortably with my hand. It only weighs 10 kilos and it's a huge leverage still. So with this, I can go to all of these different height positions. Works beautifully, and when I'm happy with that, when I want to close it, I just go right up to the top, and down she goes. Good as. Alrighty, so we've come over to my workbench, and I've got two of these kind of door stays clamped in position. The one on the left here, that's as you buy it. The brand is Cam Stay. I can post up the part number. They come in different lengths. Basically, this is designed to lock in as it gets to a longer length so that you cannot compress it any further. So it'll go out into any of these spots. So it's quite progressive, 5 different spots there. And then when it goes out to the full extent, this little red device gets in the way of the pin dropping into one of those catches, and it actually holds it up out of the way and it allows it to go back to a compressed position. So just to clarify, it gets longer and longer and locks as it gets longer, and then when you make it as long as possible, it goes back. That's cool. It doesn't really do the right thing for a Torana bonnet hinge though, because a Torana bonnet hinge has a spring and it actually is as long as it gets when the bonnet is closed. So that's the opposite of what's needed for my application. So this is what I did. I cut that apart, or I disassembled and then cut it apart, and I reversed it. So we will do a bit of a demonstration here. Once again, it's clamped up, and with this one I can just progressively pull it out and it doesn't engage at all. And now this is like the bonnet being closed. Now you can open it progressively. Open a bit further. It's getting shorter each time. Open a bit further. Open a bit further, etc. And then the same mechanism does its thing, but it's working in reverse. So now it's going longer again, which is me closing the bonnet. So that is successfully modified to suit a Torana, and I'll dissect it and take another video of kind of the inner workings of it. Okay, so I've disassembled my modified one and I've left the factory one assembled for reference. So that's the factory one there. It shows the arm that kind of slides out the left, on the left of the frame, and you can see that this body, due to the direction of the cam detents, it's in the same orientation here. So that's how that one started. Now, it doesn't have a sliding arm sticking out the left anymore. Instead, it has a fixed arm. So that's just a bit of 3mm flat steel, which I TIG welded on. That's the brand there, Cam Stay. As I said, I can put the part number up for these. So it's a 3mm bit of steel welded on, and that's just one piece. Now, on the old one, it had a mounting point there and a mounting point there for the two bolts or whatever you were using. In my case, I've opened those holes up a little bit. I I don't have them in the same spots anymore, of course. So that hole there on the rigid piece, that is, I just made a little brass bush that, you know, falls into place there and stops it moving on the thread on the bolted mount that I've or the stud that I've kind of welded into the assembly. Not pictured here, but part of the hinge itself. So yeah, bigger holes. That one there is still needed, not for mounting anything. It's just, I just need to have a bit of steel there to kind of keep everything square as it goes to the fully extended position. But that's not a mounting hole anymore. That's just, you know, it's just a hole. It's just so that the steel can still exist there. So there's a bit more of a kind of longer track for the mechanism to ride along. The piece on the right is the bit that slides within that, and I can show you the mechanism and how it works here. So it's got this plastic sliding device, so that can move back and forth. I've had to make this piece, generally, what I've had to do is cut it through there. So I've cut the kind of inner piece through there. I've welded it on over here with a lengthening piece between there and there. It actually has to be longer than the original. Like the overall assembly has to be a lot longer than the original one to suit my application. So yeah, I lengthened that, and of course I made it longer out there as well. Now I've got some kind of shapes here. So this area here, I've just built up a bit of steel with a MIG welder, and same with these two little pads there and there. And they prevent this plastic device from sliding too far. It needs to, of course, move with this, but it has a bit of a stroke that it kind of slides relative to it. So it's got a, I don't know, 20 mil stroke or whatever, and it needs to be able to be helped along so it doesn't get, you know, out of mesh and out of position. The thing that actually kind of makes this thing work is this ledge, that kind of ledge there. And what happens is when that's held up, that doesn't help very much. When that is held up by the cam, this is given an opportunity to slide under there and kind of lock it up out of the mesh so it's not falling into those areas. And the spring will fight it. That tiny little stainless spring will fight that. But as long as it lands on that little ledge at the right time, it'll stay out of the mesh, and it will allow it to return to its kind of home position. So if you take that off, it's extremely simple. It's got a stainless pin, which has an interference fit. It had a shitty mild steel one, and the fit was no good once it got munted when I punched it out, so I've just made a new stainless one on the lathe. I'm probably going to make one a little bit tighter in fit, but otherwise it's okay. It's got this tiny little compression spring there with a taper at each end, and that device, I'll take the spring out of the way to make it a bit simpler, but that device there, it just pivots. I look so dumb when I move my hands when I can't see them through the camera lens. Anyway, so that just pivots like that, and it's as simple as that. So that all slides into there, gets a bush at each end on the bolts, and that's pretty simple. If I pull the bonnet hinge over, the bonnet hinge that I've modified here, so that's for the driver's side of the car, that just shows where I've welded on this little pad there, another pad there, and that's kind of where the spring mounts were originally. So that would have been like that, and the spring would have hooked around there. This one over here, same deal basically. Spring hooks around there. The only other modification is that this used to have a shape like that. I don't know if you can see that, but that prevents the spring from opening too far. Actually prevents it from opening beyond that point. There's no point in having that with the new latch or the new stay thing, because it's got a limit strap anyway. So now with this one, if you wanted to, you could open it further, but it doesn't harm anything in my case. So that's pretty much it. All of this stuff needs to be zinc plated before it looks good again. It'll just get zinc plated black. Just the same finish as what's on there, which is the kind of look that I want. And I'm pretty pleased with that. Cheers.